Hey everyone, this is Logan Hertz with Hazeltine LLC, and we are continuing our series of interviews with financial professionals with a lot of experience in the industry. And we are very excited to have with us today Mr. Benton Penn, who has over 30 years of experience in the industry. He does a lot of things, but really his emphasis is on fee based financial planning, which is to say, he gives you an actual overarching plan with unifying ideas rather than selling individual products. So, Benton, how are you doing today, my friend?
And I'm doing good. How are you doing for a Friday?
Doing well, doing well. It is Friday afternoon, so I think both of us are probably hopefully accomplished a lot. Um, but
Yeah,
we're business owners, so we don't get days off. So,
no, we don't. We don't.
so let me start with one of the things that we were talking about off camera. What is the difference between your fee-based financial planning and the standard approach that other financial professionals might do?
Well, so from a customer standpoint, anytime a customer or generally most clients, prospects approach a financial advisor, it's generally with the idea of I need to solve a problem with a product. I need to purchase life insurance. I need to purchase disability insurance. I need to invest some money, right? And it's very it's very focused on that one product. So what I do differently is I actually charge for my advice. And what that does for the client, number one, it takes the pressure off having to have a product oriented presentation. Whether or not you buy an insurance product, whether or not you invest some money, it doesn't change the advice at that point. Because as the advisor, I'm being compensated for that time, that advice, the strategies I put in place. Now, I will tell you that, nine times out of 10, most of my clients are going to go to a product, which, for me, a product is a tool. Life insurance, a tool to accomplish many different things in a financial plan that we're trying to accomplish. My focus, I have two areas of focus. One is on retirement distribution planning. And of course, I love using whole life for the tax-free buildup of cash, and it's a Roth alternative. So that's one tool that I use. There's other tools, to accomplish an end to a means, but a lot of times the advice that I give has nothing to do with the products that I may or may not offer.
Yeah, that's such a great point because I think oftentimes people are like they're looking for the cheapest option, and I've heard people say, "Well, I don't want to pay a fee up front. I'd rather, just put my money into an investment, and that way the advisor only makes money if he makes me money." It's like, well, oftentimes the least expensive option in the short run ends up being the most expensive option in the long run. And in some of my videos, I talk about how the most expensive products are those that are offered for free, quote unquote, right?
Yeah.
Whenever a very profitable business offers you something, quote unquote, for free, you should question that. Like, wait a minute, they're making money off of me somehow. So I have a free bank account, I have a free brokerage account where I can trade stocks for free. Well, wait a minute. They're making money somehow. So oftentimes, yeah, when people come and pay you out of pocket up front, it ends up being more cost effective over the long run because I agree with you. Um, what really they should be paying for is not a product, but a strategy, right? A strategy. And what you're supposed to be doing is advising them, right? And then as part of that overall strategy, we will have products for sure.
Right.
And you mentioned, I love what you talked about with retirement distribution, right? Because I think so many people are focused on accumulation. It's just about building a nest egg. It's not about, well, wait a minute, once you get to retirement, the size of your nest egg doesn't matter as much as how much safe, reliable, passive income can you get from it. And a lot of people who have built up substantial nest eggs are nervous about retirement because they don't know how long that nest egg is going to last them. And if you've been used to watching your net worth go up every single year, and now all of a sudden you're retired and you have to start watching your net worth go down because you're drawing down that nest egg, it can be pretty nerve wracking.
Yep.
So, talk a little bit about the importance of distribution and the strategies that you typically use for that.
Yeah. So I have a little bit of a unique approach. I agree with you wholeheartedly, first of all. And, other financial advisors hate it when I say this, but I'll say it to a room full of advisors. Quite frankly, if you're an investor, if you're somebody in the accumulation phase, you don't really need an advisor. It's not rocket science. I mean, just keep throwing money at a portfolio, and over time, guess what? It's going to go up, dollar cost average into the market, and just have that as your strategy. And you're going to get to a point you've built wealth. That's honestly the way you build wealth. Use some good ETFs. Use some. I mean, you don't need an advisor. You certainly don't need an advisor during the accumulation phase to manage it. I mean, my goodness. But I get in a lot of trouble with my brethren advisors when I say that. But where you get in trouble is when you get to distribution, when you get to retirement. Some of the things that I hear is, oh my God, how am I paying more in taxes in retirement than I ever paid when I was working? Well, it's because you have your retirement set up wrong. Or the biggest, you talked about it, will I run out of money? You know, um, it's possible. So my approach is a little bit different. So when I'm sitting down with a client, we do a couple of things first. First of all, we figure out what, and you call it your minimum dignity, you call it your necessary needs, you call it, whatever you want to call it. We have to figure out first and foremost that perfectly secure payment that's going to be there for the rest of your life and never goes away. And so how do we meet that? Number one, if they're blessed to have a pension, that counts. That is secure income that's not going to go away. Social Security, that is secure income that theoretically is not going to go away. And so the first thing we figure out is what is their secure money needs. So sometimes, not every time, sometimes we'll end up having to buy income. Now, how do you do that? A SPIA, a single premium immediate annuity, is the best way to do that. I don't like the deferred income annuities for this part of my planning process. But once we've got the secure income figured out, we set that aside, and whatever's left in the portfolio, I call that your fund money. And we divide that up to the three phases of retirement: your go-go years, your slow-go years, and your no-go years. And of course, we allocate it. The first 10 years of your retirement, you're probably going to spend about 70% of the portfolio. In fact, I give you permission to go out there and spend everything that we, designate for that fund money for those 10 years. Go get rid of it. Go travel. Go do all the fun things you want to do, because you'll never have to worry about running out of money to pay house note, groceries, things like that. And so we just have a planning process that addresses secure needs and fund money. There's a book, kind of the author escapes me, but Paychecks and Playchecks. And it's
Tom
kind of that.
Hegna.
Yeah,
Tom
Tom Hanks.
Hegna.
Tom's a great guy. So Tom, kind of along those, you need your paychecks and you need your playchecks, right? Your paychecks are going to pay the bills. Your playchecks, that's to go have fun. Because the funniest thing as a planner is sitting and watching a couple, and they have worked so hard to accumulate this pile of money, however big that pile is, however small it is. They've worked really hard to do that. Getting them to turn loose of it, and the psychological of seeing now that their accounts are going to start going down. What I have found is if we can show them and convince them and about the secure money, it kind of relieves some of the tension and the anxiety about going ahead and spending that money. That's what it's there for.
Yeah, and I love the fact that there's a magic metric out there that you did not mention, because it's a metric that everybody throws out and it's completely irrelevant. You
Right.
never once mentioned, because it doesn't matter, return on investment. Never once. Never once did you mention return on investment. Okay. That metric cannot be smashed hard enough. It is not the right metric, right? Ask any rich person, how'd you get rich? They're never going to say, "Oh, I got a great return on my investment." You know, you know,
No,
how do you accumulate that money? They don't even bother to calculate return on investment. Why would I? No, it's about cash flow, right?
right.
It's about cash. So
You
sorry, go
spend
ahead, Ben.
you don't spend a return, right? You spend cash. And it's cash flow planning. I've never seen, to your point, I have never seen somebody spend a 8.2% return. Never happens. And you know, when you get all these people that are so focused on their returns, you got to dig into those returns. You know, because I'll tell this real quick. I had a client a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, and his portfolio was up, but excuse me, his portfolio was down, but he had a huge tax bill. How is this possible? How am I, how is this possible? It's because returns really don't matter. You have to pay attention to the inner workings of everything. Well, it's the same thing, you can't for me, returns is a good look in the rearview mirror. What did we do last year? Great, wonderful, check it off. We did good, as a comparison. Great. How does that affect future planning? Not a bit. Really not a bit.
Yeah, yeah, and I think it's also because a lot of the standard conventional wisdom is about take as much money as you reasonably can, lock it up in some Wall Street controlled jail, right? And if they're going to convince you to lock your money up in their jail, they have to promise you something in return. And it can't be income, right? It can't be anything liquid because they want to hold your money and never give it back to you. So what they promise you is return on investment because that way they can give you something without actually giving you something, right?
Right.
So you see your account balance going up, but it's all basically fantasy because it's not like you can't use it. It's not affecting your lifestyle. You're afraid to touch it, right?
Right.
Because that's your nest egg. I can't touch that, right? So, I'm going to go in a little bit of my soapbox here. One of the, I do a lot of whole life like you do, and people get obsessed over the loss of liquidity, right? You pay a premium in and you don't have access to the full amount, right? Well, actually, the liquidity of whole life insurance is way better than any other vehicle because you can access the cash value without taking on debt and without interrupting the growth in the policy. Whereas the money you have in your brokerage account, or God forbid, in a retirement account, right? The actual practical liquidity you have there is zero, zero,
That's right.
right?
I
So,
tell
yeah.
people, I ask people all the time, what is the surrender value of your IRA? What is the surrender value? I'm sorry using that terminology. What's the surrender value of that? God forbid, so let's stop right there because you and I think, are on the same page on this. I'm not saying don't participate in a 401k at all, especially if you've got an employer match in it. By God, take that free money all day long, every bit. But one of the things that I try to talk to my clients about is when you get to at least 59 and a half, let's do some tax planning. Let's get that money out of there that you're going to have to pay taxes on, and let's deploy it. What a lot of advisors will do, they'll deploy it to a Roth, and that's fine. I'm not opposed to a Roth. It's got the tax, but it doesn't have all the benefits of a whole life policy, right? It does not have the benefits. You put the money in a Roth and you need to pull cash out of it, guess what? You can never put it back in for growth,
Hmm.
ever.
Hmm.
You got to wait
Opportunity cost.
everything
Because I
else.
will give, yeah, I will give them like when they tell you don't withdraw your money because you'll miss out on gains, they're actually correct, right? And this is one of the benefits of whole life is you can use the money without missing out on those gains because your whole policy keeps earning for you. If you have 100,000 in cash value in a whole life policy and you have a medical emergency, you need 50,000, you can take 50,000 via a policy loan with no
Yeah.
repayment terms whatsoever. It's not a debt. And then your full 100,000 keeps earning for you, right?
Oh yeah,
You
absolutely.
can't do that with an investment account. Now I do add parenthetically, some people would say, "Oh, but you can borrow against an investment account." Okay, now you're taking on risk. Now you're taking on real debt. You're putting your whole portfolio at risk, right? It could be liquidated with a margin call. You better hope those assets perform, right? Or you could be in serious trouble. That is not at all the same thing as a policy.
I tell people all the time, yes, you can do that. You're absolutely right. Securities-based lending is a real thing, and it is a good tool. And if you're at the wealth level of, say, a Warren Buffett, who does use securities-based lending all the time, God bless him. If you're at that wealth level, then yes, all day long, utilize it as a tool and go for it. But for the average person, for the person that I'm dealing with, that you're dealing with, man, you're adding a significant amount of risk into your portfolio, but you just don't need to.
Right. And you
What?
can't borrow all of it, right? If you have cash value in a whole life policy, you can take all of it,
Yeah,
right? Um, and again, no repayment terms. Whereas in your portfolio, maybe you can borrow up to 50%, and there's going to be serious repayment terms,
yeah,
high interest rate you're paying, and serious repercussions if you don't make those repayments, or even if you do. I mean, they have the right to just pull the plug and liquidate your portfolio without your permission, right?
Let's go back to the statement on returns. And I measure, I look at historical, it's great. We, build portfolios based on whatever. Last year was a horrible year for the markets. S&P was down, the Dow was down, bonds were down. Yeah, it's all across the board. Everything's down. You know what wasn't down? What wasn't down last year?
Whole life insurance.
Whole life insurance, cash value. It's the only thing, and it is not an investment, but it's the only asset out there that has a guaranteed it's going to go up. Guaranteed every single year it's going to go up.
Hmm.
Now, is it
Hmm.
sexy? Does it perform like, I don't, name some stock? Does it perform like, an equity? No, it doesn't, but it's not designed to either. But
Hmm.
I would tell
Hmm.
you that long term, it does perform like a bond portfolio, maybe even better.
Yeah, and if we want to do an apples to apples comparison, you can't compare whole life to an investment. I get really sick when people do that. I'm like, wait,
Yes.
okay, if we want an apples to apples comparison, we need to compare the guaranteed rate of return on those two assets. The guaranteed rate of return on whole life will be positive. The
Right.
guaranteed rate of return in any market based asset, the worst case scenario is negative 100%. You could lose everything. You could lose
And
everything. Plus, I'll just add parenthetically, when they do those comparisons, I don't know where they find them, but they have like the most horribly constructed whole life policies. It'll be like if I'm comparing whole life to how the market performs and I choose the Great Depression and show, see, whole life is way better than money and equities, right? Because I just cherry pick the worst possible years from the market. Well, they do exactly the same thing, I think, without realizing it, because they just don't understand how whole life works. They have no idea how to properly construct a whole life policy. And so they end up basically doing the same thing where they cherry pick the worst possible whole life design imaginable because these are not whole life experts. They don't know how to design it. Right.
no,
So, and again,
you
what are you
hit,
designing it for? If you're designing
well,
it for death benefit, it could be a good policy, but it's probably not going to have the same level of cash value because you didn't design it for cash value or retirement income. Right.
and that's the thing, and it burns me up. So look, you can get a policy that are a dime a dozen from any advisor out there. I would encourage it. And even a poorly designed whole life is better than nothing. The best life insurance is the one that's in force on the day you die. But the reason, whole life has a bad, quote unquote, bad reputation out there is because people are dealing with agents that don't know how to properly construct it. Look, whole life is a tool, just like anything else. You've got to learn how to use it. You got to construct it correctly. And, I know you do. You and I have looked at cases together. But find an agent, that actually knows what they're doing as far as constructing, you know, to meet a certain need, to meet what we're trying to accomplish. And that's important to meet what the client is trying to accomplish. I had a recent case that, yeah, we finally got around to a case design, figured out what they were trying to do, and it wasn't a cash value play. It was a death benefit play. And getting to a certain death benefit at the reduced paid up and a certain death benefit at issue, let me tell you, it took some creativity to match those up with the premium that they have, to put into it. But yeah, it's you have to have it properly designed. And to me, it's fun to do.
Absolutely. Yeah, it is. And, you can't be an expert in everything. So again, the people who criticize whole life are never people who are experts in whole life, right? They're always experts in some product, which they view as being competing. And this to me is the sad thing. Whole life is not competing with an investment account. Like that, those two are not in competition, right?
Yeah,
You can use whole life a lot of different ways, but it is not an investment, right?
no.
So when they say a whole life is a terrible investment, I'm like, wait a minute, I never called it investment. You're being dishonest. You're being deceitful. I never said it was an investment, right? So as Peter Nelson says, they do that because that way they can make it look bad, right?
Of
Um,
course.
right.
Funny thing is the ones that are throwing the darts as hard as they can are other insurance agents that may want to sell you an IUL or a VUL or some form of universal life insurance because that's what their bailiwick is. And I'll put a whole life up against any of those products any day of the week.
Yeah, and it all gets back to to your point. It gets back to the strategy, right? What's your strategy? What are you trying to accomplish? And all these various products may have a place in that. That's fine. but we have to have a framework, a strategy in place so that we know why we took out these particular products. A lot of people are just putting money into retirement accounts without really understanding why they're doing it. What's your plan for that? What's your strategy? Why are you doing that? Right?
And this gets back to my planning process. This is part of what I do for potential clients and for clients is do some of this education, try to uneducate what they have been educated on their entire careers, you
Hmm.
know,
Hmm.
and get them to a point and really get them to open their eyes to,
Hmm.
hey, let me show you some things. They're not sexy, but they work. And this is as sound as it can be. One of my favorite things to do is tell a Rockefeller story, right? What would the Rockefellers do?
Yep.
And yeah, everybody knows the Rockefellers, everybody knows the Vanderbilts, and just do a comparison of those two families. If you want to build generational wealth, I mean, most advisors talking about building wealth is throwing everything you can in the stock market. Now, don't get me wrong, I am a securities license series 7. I can manage money and everything else. And look, you want to send me a couple $1,000,000 to manage, I'll be glad to take it. But there's just no comparison. If you want to build generational wealth, it's through life insurance and then having a planning process to sit down with a client, potential client, and just really educate them and use all the tools that we have. I think it's what makes me a little bit different. And again, I lead with planning. I charge a fee for it. If you don't want to pay the fee, that's fine. We're not going to work together. But it does take the pressure off. I feel good about the relationship if they buy nothing because I've charged them for my time. I've been compensated for everything I've put into it.
Yep.
And I put about 20 hours into each planning engagement.
Yeah, that's a significant amount of time, and a significant amount of value that goes into it. And yeah, I think if you end up paying more out of pocket up front, you usually end up with a much more cost effective solution over the long run. And to your point, it doesn't become a product based sale because your compensation is not linked to the sale of any particular product. Right.
Yeah,
And yeah, like we keep talking about the importance of a strategy, right? And having a
the
framework.
importance of a
And
strategy. And not only that, I like to try to unlock some strategic ideas ahead of time that they can take and execute. They can go up the road to their CPA or their advisor, and it's not no skin off my back. But I want to show them how are you going to pay my fee? Because my fee is heavy. I'll be very honest, I'm not cheap. Um, but just one idea. Do you own a business? Great. Hey, you got 3 kids. Are they working in your business? Are you paying them? No. Well, here's why. And I'll get up on the whiteboard and I'll draw it out. Did you know under the tax code you can pay them a little bit over 13,000, but let's say 13,000 and that's this much, and you write it off at the business. It's not income for blah 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 blah. And you walk through and you show them, right? You show them how you can create a Roth. You can let the kid pay for his own life insurance and do the strategy on a smaller scale with the kid. That's one idea. Cost segmentation. That's another one. I broad strokes on that because I'm not an expert in it, but just show them ways that we're going to save money. And typically, the reaction that I get is wow. I said, yeah, wow. If you and I did that in 10 minutes, imagine what we'll do after 3 months.
right, right. And that's great because I love that because one of the things I try to tout is when I meet with people, I give you ideas that give you immediate concrete results,
Yeah.
not hypothetical future results. It's not give me some money, I'll put it into quote unquote the market, which is not a market,
Right.
and maybe hypothetically it'll grow, right? Maybe it will. I'm not saying it won't. Maybe it will. But that doesn't do anything for you today, right? What I think you and I do is in that first meeting or early on in the process, we're giving you ideas that you can implement on your own, right? Or I can help you with. And boom, you just freed up several $100 a month of cash flow. You just saved a bunch in taxes, right? You just got a more efficient housing payment, whatever it is, right? And so I think that way people appreciate because when people go and talk with a typical financial professional, there's a little bit of defensiveness because they're like, oh, how much is this going to cost? And I think with the way that you and I operate, it's like, well, actually on net, you're going to benefit a lot, even in the short term, right? So yeah, there is a cost, right? There's a cost to anything, cost to everything, sure, but you're going to get that back right quick. right?
Absolutely. And I'll tell you, the pushback that I got when I was at my previous companies, man, don't do that. You're taking money off the table. I'm like, okay, that's you can feel that way. I will tell you that every engagement that I have with a client for $4,500, just put that out there, for $4,500 actually is worth to me many multiples of that, many multiples of my fee, because they are going to take the strategy, and run with it. And they're not going to go up the street. They're going to go with the person that created the strategy to execute it. It's pretty straightforward.
And yep, and the more value you add, it's the abundance mindset, right? It's the
Yep.
abundance mindset.
Yep.
So Ben, we're reaching the end of our time. Given your over 30 years of experience, and everything you've learned in the business, are there some closing thoughts you want to leave our audience with?
Here's what I'll say. And I was talking to somebody else earlier today. The more I do what we do, I've had, people ask me about my success and everything else. And what I've noticed is it all goes back to the basics. It all goes back to the basics. What we've talked about mostly here today, whole life. Well, guess what is the oldest formula? That is something that went out of favor, is starting to come back into favor. It all goes back to the basics. Marketing, it all goes back to the basics. Activity, it all goes back to the basics. Stay with the fundamentals, because they will always, always work.
That's
Always.
right. The principles of money, finance, credit, banking have not changed for thousands of years. Products may
Nope.
come and go, bull markets and bear markets come and go, but the principles stay the same. It's a
Absolutely.
timeless wisdom. I love it. Well, Benton, thanks so much for your time. We greatly appreciate it. I'm sure we'll do this again in the future, but we really
Definitely.
appreciate your wisdom and look forward to speaking with you again, sir.
Yes, sir. You bet.